Welcome to the 129th season of the Canadian Club Toronto, Canada's podium. For over a century, this stage has united visionaries and leaders from politics, business, community, and the arts to share insights on the most pressing issues of our time. And with Canada in a pivotal moment, it's more important than ever that we come together.
We've been having important discussions and debates around this podium in this country for well over a century. I call this a historic podium of record.
Our club's always been a forum for visionaries, public figures, and decision makers to command attention to the issues of our time.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. For those standing at the bar, eventually, please take your seats once you have your drinks. Welcome to everyone in the room and to those joining us online. My name is Shazan Chu, and as president of Canadian Club Toronto, I'm delighted to welcome you to our 9th annual Pride celebration. Canadian Club Toronto has proudly hosted Pride conversations that celebrate diversity, foster understanding, and amplify LGBTQ plus voices over the years. We've explored topics ranging from bringing your authentic self to work, to trans rights, HIV treatment and advocacy, and the evolving challenges and opportunities facing the LGBTQ plus communities. Tonight, we turn our attention to a uniquely Canadian story. Over the past 2 decades, Canadian film and television have helped bring queer stories from the margins to the mainstream. From groundbreaking series and award-winning films to a new generation of creators reaching audiences around the world, Canadian storytellers have played an important role in expanding representation, challenging stereotypes, and creating space for more authentic and diverse voices. This evening, we'll explore how queer storytelling in Canada continues to evolve, the impact these stories have on culture and identity, and what comes next. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement that we gather today in Titkaronto, the place in the water where the trees stand, on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit under Treaty 13. This land has always been a meeting place to share knowledge, strengthen community, and imagine futures together. Canadian Club Toronto carries forward that tradition. In convening conversations that shape our nation, we honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who call this city home. May our gatherings continue in that same spirit to listen, to learn, and to build collective hope and prosperity. Our ability to host conversations like tonight's, is possible because of the generosity of our partners and sponsors. Tonight's event is proudly sponsored by TD Bank Group. Thank you for your support and commitment to fostering inclusion and meaningful dialogue. To our season sponsors, the Canadian Bankers Association and the Ontario Regional Council of Carpenters, and to our official airline sponsor, Air Canada, thank you. And to Canada's Forest Trust, our nature partner, who help us reduce our carbon footprint by planting a smart forest in our honor. We thank you as well. This evening also supports an important cause. A portion of tonight's ticket proceeds will be donated to Rainbow Railroad, whose work helps LGBTQ plus individuals facing persecution find safety around the world. Now, I'm sure tonight's conversation will spark ideas and questions. We'll be opening the floor for audience questions following the panel discussion. For those joining us online, you can submit questions through the live stream platform, and our team will do their best to include them. And now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator and panelists. Our moderator is Judy Lung, Vice President, Strategy, Communications, and Stakeholder Relations at TIFF. With more than 2 decades of experience spanning film, television, festivals, broadcasting, production, and media, Judy brings a unique perspective on how stories move from creators to audiences. In addition to her leadership role at TIFF, she serves on the membership board of the Golden Globes and is deeply engaged in conversations around representation, audience engagement, and the future of storytelling. Joining Judy this evening are 3 outstanding creators and champions of LGBTQ+ storytelling. Damon De Oliveira is producer and partner at Conquering Lion Pictures and one of Canada's most accomplished film and television producers. His credits include acclaimed productions such as Brother, Wildhood, The Book of Negroes, The Grizzlies, and Rude. His latest film, Steal Away, premiered at TIFF. Damon is also a past chair of the Canadian Media Producers Association, serves on TIFF's board of directors, and was the inaugural recipient of TIFF's Amplify Voices BIPOC and Canadian Trailblazer Award. Peter Kinnett is a writer, filmmaker, broadcaster, and award-winning CBC arts producer and journalist. He is the host of CBC's Canadian Screen Award-winning series, Here and Queer, which explores LGBTQ+ culture and issues across Canada. Peter also curates the popular Queer Cinema Club film series at Toronto's Paradise Theatre. Michelle Mama is an award-winning filmmaker, producer, and founder of Gay Agenda, a production company dedicated to developing and producing authentic queer stories. A 6-time Canadian Screen Award nominee and veteran producer-director, Michelle recently launched Anti-Diva, the Carol Pope Confessions, selected as the opening night film of the 2026 Hot Docs International Film Festival. She is also currently producing Queer Elders for TVO and developing a documentary on Canadian fashion icon Jeannie Becker. Yeah. Please join me in welcoming Judy, Michelle, Damon, and Peter to Canada's podium.
Thank you, Shizanne, and thank you everyone for joining us. So good evening, welcome. Personally, I'm thrilled to be up here with these 3 individuals. One of them I've known for, I'm gonna say 25 years, but nobody's counting. Another one I've known of and gotten to know over the past few years, which I'm very thrilled and honored by, and yet another I have probably known of for over a decade and have not had the pleasure of meeting in person until now, so I am very thrilled to be doing that, and I'm very thrilled for all of you to hear from them about their work, about their vision, about what they've experienced and what they hope to do in the coming years, because they are all such incredible role models and leaders for our industry here, and I'm just so proud to be next to them. So thank you all for being here, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quiz later on who's who in terms of who I identify.
I'm Peter.
So, and I want to thank the Canadian Club of Toronto, of course, and I want to thank Shizanne, and I want to thank Colleen, who's here somewhere, for pulling this together and really giving us an opportunity to create a conversation that didn't have too many guidelines, and so we'll see how that goes. But she really, came to me and us and really wanted us to talk about the things we want to talk about, and that doesn't happen all the time. So I would just want to acknowledge how important that is. So tonight's conversation, as you know, is called From Subtext to Spotlight, LGBTQ+ Stories on Screen. That title It didn't just come together out of nothing. There was a lot of thought and intention behind that, and rightly so. For many of us, we know that so much of LGBTQ plus screen history has been about reading between the lines, finding meaning in subtext, side characters or quoted relationships, or stories that were powerful but still treated as niche. I will kick off by acknowledging that I'm here tonight as an ally and a supporter and someone who works in a sector where representation, access, authorship, and visibility can carry cultural weight. My role tonight is not to speak on behalf of the community, but to help guide a conversation that centers the perspectives, experience, and leadership of our fine, incredible panelists. So, we're going to talk about a lot of things. I think what you're going to hear, some things you might be surprised by, some things we might be surprised by, but I think one of the threads that we'll probably come back to time and time again is that visibility is not necessarily the same as stability. So I'm going to kick things off by asking Peter, who I think maybe in the intro, surprise, was introduced with many titles, but one of them, a historian. So Peter, I'm going to say over the past 20, 25 years, can you set the table for us? What are some of the big things that have transformed LGBTQ plus representation in film, television, mainstream entertainment?
Sure. I mean, I was actually really thinking about this last night because I hosted a screening of The Celluloid Closet, which talk about Subtext to Spotlight and historians, like sort of the definitive project covering the first 100 years, basically, of queer representation in cinema.
Wow.
And that was 1996. And, you know, it gets into a lot of the subtext of the 50s and 60s and also, you know, the surge in the early 90s with new queer cinema. But I was really thinking last night, okay, well, what's happened in the 30 years since then? Like before, you know, that movie came out in 1996. That was before Ellen. That was before Will and Grace. That was before Brokeback Mountain. You know, these are just sort of things that we think of as real sort of benchmarks of representation over the past 30 years. But to me, in the past 20 years, the thing that stands out to me the most is, you know, we saw in the 90s specifically gay men taking back their own narrative and being the writers and directors of these films and telling their own stories. What we're finally seeing, just really in the past 5 to 10 years, trans people taking back, and that's like in terms of like the way Hollywood has destroyed a member of the LGBTQ community, what Hollywood has done to trans characters on screen is horrifying. And it's really, really wonderful to see that in the past 5 to 10 years, we are seeing trans filmmakers tell their own stories for really the first time ever. And I think that's really just changing the way that cis allies of trans people see the trans perspective, because we had been fed, you know, Dallas Buyers Club and various bullshit of that sort. Yep. And that's where we were getting our information, even as queer cis people. So, I mean, that to me is like one really big thing that stands out. But yeah, I mean, from Ellen to Brokeback Mountain to sort of trans films finally getting a moment, and I think so much has happened in the past 20, 25 years that we could be up here forever talking about it. But overall, I think it's very positive. And it's really sort of great that we're, from where we were in 1996 to where we are now, it's stunning how much has changed.
It's the access to queer content that has really shifted. And I think we've seen that with, you know, the onset of streaming services, kind of specialize in LGBT cinema. That wasn't around. Now, I'm going to date myself, but I'm going to go back, you know, to like 1989, when the Euclid was actually an art house and not a condominium. And that was one of the first places that you could actually go to see like what was happening in the realm of queer cinema globally. And for me, as almost, well, no, I was out of my teens then, but I was, you know, a member of that organization, but you really had to seek it out. And I think the difference, you know, I have queer nieces who are in their 30s now. It's just taken for granted that you can find almost anything you want, you know, by searching online. And that's really the thing that sort of like opened the door to representation.
Yeah, absolutely. I even think of like, you know, I grew up in the 90s. It was sneaking a copy of a VHS tape home. Like, and that keeps, there's an evolution of how we get that content as people trying to find ourselves as queer people. And now it's just, they can watch Greg Araki with the click of a button.
Exactly. We would spend, you know, hours and hours waiting for the kiss. I mean, wait, and then someone would die because they kissed someone of the same sex, and we were just like,
and one foot was not on the floor.
But speaking to your point, exactly. But speaking to your point, Bound was an inflection point, I think, in 1996, because, well, now we know 2 trans women who directed Bound, At the time, it was, what are these two white dudes, cis white dudes, directing this film about lesbians? But now we know. And that was mind-blowing. I saw the world premiere at TIFF, and it was like, oh, like truly a huge moment in the 90s. And then, yeah, since then, I mean, it has gotten better, but...
Before we go there, because we will get there, I want to bring the conversation to Canada. So Peter, thank you for laying out a bit of a foundation for us, and I love that, you know, very positive outlook, because I feel like I know where some of this might go. Let's talk about Canada. Let's talk about, in that framework that you've just talked about, and I'll look to Damon, not dating you, but you did say like things like 90s and 89. So over the course
I was very young.
Very young. He was only 5. Over the course of quite an impressive career in Canada and beyond, but working as a Canadian, what have you seen? What progress or not?
Of course, I've seen progress. I mean, I started my career in this world as an actor, and I remember doing a play called Lilies in 1990 at Theatre Passe Muraille.
Yes.
And that was one of the first professional jobs that I had as an actor, and that was kind of inspiration for me to see how much it took to sort of get that play up and running, but it was easier in the theater. To sort of move into film, I started working with John Grayson as a producer, and there were 2 films that we made together. And, you know, at that time, this was right after he made the film Lilies, which I was not involved with, but it was a wonderful film. Won the then Genie Award, I think, for Best Canadian Film.
Yeah.
But then to make his next film after that, it took like about 5 or 6 years for us to raise that financing. And that is a challenge. And that's still a challenge, I would say, in Canada. And this is me wearing my producer hat now, which is mostly what I do.
Yeah.
To sort of see how you kind of have to argue for the value of something in order for it to be financed. And, you know, a lot of structures are in place that now encourage more and more queer content, but you're still struggling. You're still sort of, you know, having to sort of prove your point. And I think that's not changed. You know, that was there back in the early 90s, and I feel like it's still there now.
So I want to come back to that and ask a very pointed question, but I want to throw to Michelle as well before we get there.
Listen, there's a lot of competing interests for our public money. And as you guys know, we're very fortunate in Canada to have public money to access grants and funds and all those things. And yes, there's boxes to check, you know, and sometimes the evaluation is based on those boxes. And so you wonder, you know, are things getting selected because they check all the boxes or because of quality? That's another issue. I feel like there's a lot of issues with the people who make the decisions. And that is my number one issue is that because of these hybrid systems of government and public money and also tax credits and all that stuff, we're beholden to public interest. And what is public interest? And that is the question. What is public interest? How many gay shows do you need? Why, when a network looks at their slate, are they saying, okay, well, we just need 1 out of the 10? Or are they saying, well, we need 5 out of the 10? Or are they saying, these are the best shows, let's put them on? You know what I mean? Let's not dismiss them because they're queer. Do you know what I mean? And so when things do squeeze through, like Schitt's Creek, which, let's be honest, would have gone no matter what with Eugene and Dan and all those people who were involved. But when these little shows, and you know which one I'm going to say next, Heated Rivalry, when they sneak through, but
How long did that take?
But I told you it wasn't going to take long. I just like break the seal. You know we're going to talk about it. But also what you need to understand.
We're going to have a drink every time we say Heated Rivalry tonight.
Exactly. I'm going to send a drink to Jacob Tierney. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Brendan.
Yes, and thank you, Brendan. But I think the issue that what people don't realize is that Jacob Tierney has been working his butt off for 20 years. He did Letterkenny and Shoresy, which are 2 like deeply cis, straight, amazing, but also extremely smart, cool, interesting shows that people all over the world are obsessed with. And our subversively Canadian in that the characters don't give a shit if other people are queer, and they're not homophobic, and so it's like it's subversive work that he's been doing in the space to make sure that stories are told in an appropriate way,
and just pushing the door
exactly.
a little
and
more,
then they finally said, now what would you like to do? And he said, this is what I'd like to do. So he earned that show. It's not like you can just come out of, you know what I mean? And so we can't call it like a one-hit wonder or something out of the blue. He worked to get the right to do that, or the privilege to do that show, and not be interfered with.
I think, recognizing that some of those characters all along the way have been pushing that door open, maybe not obvious to audiences at the time, but I think looking back. So I want to now go back to maybe some of these roadblocks. You've alluded to some of them. Damon, in your career and wearing the various hats, and especially most recently as chair of the CMPA, what can you tell us about decision makers and representing producers across Canada?
Look,
what are the issues?
When I was wearing my hat as chair of the CMPA, it was really about pushing the Canadian government broadly to respect the contribution, which is about $12 billion a year that Canadian film, television, and media bring to our economy. Which, when you put that up against potash, it's pretty incredible, But it's like you gotta prove to the folks that are actually funding us. And compared to other industries, it is quite alarming at how low our subsidy is that we're getting. You hear a lot about tax credits, but like when you compare it to, say, the oil industry, it's pretty amazing. And people love to come to Canada because we have the best crews, incredible talent, a 30% discount on the dollar, and tax credits, So these are things that we were kind of focused on maintaining and increasing during the time that I was chairing the CMPA. Now, I would say with regards to our sort of public policy of funding, every institution kind of has their own mandate. And, have LGBTQ folks been included in mandates? Absolutely, Sometimes we're put in our little sandbox and it's, there you go, you can have your little budget to do your LGBTQ thing and, we'll give the rest over here. That is something that I have come up against in trying to get stuff financed. But I would say Canada is still the envy of the world in that we have a sustainable sort of funding system that is available to filmmakers of all walks, colors, and sizes, where diversity is now becoming a criteria more and more in the decision-making process.
Brand Canada is very strong right now, like when you talk to the international folks. And I think we have an opportunity also to cash in on it. Like, so what do we know? We know the Americans are shying away from queer content. We know that they are the ones who generated the most of it to begin with. So what does that create? It creates an opportunity for us to do what we've always done better than them anyway, which is weird, queer, and funny.
Oh yeah.
Right?
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. So anything think about it. Think about SCTV. Think about our culture. Think about
Kids
the history of comedy. And Kids in the Hall was fucking queer. Sorry.
Yeah, totally. That was a queer show.
It was. Yeah. It was queering the idea of what comedy could be, right? And I love those guys. And that pushed the needle further, and that made a huge impact in the US, right? Yeah. So all of our exports, if they're weird, queer, and funny, or all of the above, or whatever combination of that, we're always winning. And so I think we should be bullish right now. I think we should be out in the marketplace, selling our wares and crowing about Brand Canada being strong, 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 because I think it's an opportunity.
Absolutely. And what I've seen in the past is that doors swing open for a while and then they slam shut, So I feel like we're in the opportunity mode right now.
I'm just thinking about this. I'm currently working on a book about the 1977 film Outrageous, which is kind of the OG Canadian success of Craig Russell. And it was, it's fascinating because it was a massive success story, like huge, like the biggest Canadian English language film that ever.
I studied it in film school.
But the opportunities that came out of that were not taken up by the Canadian film industry, and they just sort of saw it as a one-off thing. And this has happened again and again and again with success stories that we've had with queer content. And it seems like now we're in sort of the ultimate situation of, nothing outrageous, with all due respect, is not heated rivalry. Heated rivalry is giving us an opportunity like we've never really had before. So how do we not squander it like we have repeatedly in the past with these opportunities?
So let's ask that question. I'd like to
How
ask
do we
each
not
of
squander?
you, but before I do, I just want to, and I can't address the audiences at home, but just a quick show of hands. Who here either works in or has worked in film, television, entertainment, arts? So
Okay.
a good
Like
a
maybe
good number.
40%, maybe 30 or 40%. Okay.
So, an opportunity ahead of us. And I love case studies. Personally, I love case studies to help guide us and help us learn some lessons. Great case study that you've raised, Peter. So yes, outrageous in the 70s, totally different universe, totally different, right? Canadian industry. But if there are learnings, and you don't have to give us spoilers from your upcoming book.
Oh, it's okay.
But what would you say right now in this moment? Because I agree 100%, we have a massive opportunity in front of us, but that door can close quickly, and there are other forces, other international forces at play as well. So in your mind, I'll start with you, Peter. What can we do?
I mean, if we want to use the case study of, this is basically, anybody who doesn't know, there's a 50-year-old movie called Outrageous. It's about a drag performer in Toronto who wants to make it big. It's a fabulous movie. It's completely available on YouTube. Anyway, it's basically, they got $150,000. It became a sensation in America and in Canada. It very much affected the, I forget what telefilm was called then, but whatever the version of telefilm was at that time, it was kind of the primary reason it got quadrupled the funding. But what they didn't do, in my opinion, was the director Richard Benner and the star Craig Russell was invest in them as creators going forward and trust them. And it was kind of a situation where sort of straight film culture benefited from these two wonderful queer men who both passed away in 1990. They didn't get to reap the benefit from it, and they didn't even economically reap the benefit from it. But both of them sort of suffered after that success story.
What a
So
familiar
I don't know
story.
what the translation is to what's happening now, but I do think there's a lesson in there about fostering our talent and giving them as many opportunities to shine here as we can, because that is something that I do think we have struggled to even with the example with John Grayson and giving him, he makes Lilies. It's like wins Best Picture at the Canadian Oscars, and then it takes him 5 years to make another film.
Another film, exactly. And it feels like it's also an Anglo-Canadian thing, like when you look at Xavier Dolan in Quebec, they just fan the flames, maybe they fan them too much, but
he also became a darling at Cannes. The international world also just grabbed him and celebrated him.
But huge talent.
Absolutely.
And nurtured inside Quebec. And I think Quebec maybe relates to their own a bit differently than English Canada does, possibly. We could start a debate about that right now.
It's a huge thing. I mean, Quebec, I don't know how many of you guys know this, they have a built-in audience for everything they make. And they have a healthy box office. You can make a film in Quebec and make your money back. It's amazing. I cannot tell you how much we envy the Quebecois for that, But it's a language-based thing. It's a specificity thing, because Quebecois people want to see Quebecois films, not French films from France. It's there's nuance. I think for me, what I would say is, and it goes back to decision makers, and I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I do want to say, if you have 10 projects in front of you, judge them based on their merit, not like these 3 that are queer, we've got one spot for them. Let's decide between the 3 queer projects which one will go. Look at all 10 and pick the best 3. You know what I mean? That I think is the number one thing for me, is that it still feels like there's a thumb on the scale all the time of oh, well, we can't have too much of this and we can't have too much of that. And that's where I come back to decision makers and courage. When you have broadcasters like TVO or CBC or whatever who say, you know what, we're gonna take this queer story and we're gonna do something with them. We're gonna trust the filmmakers and the creators to give us what we want. And even if we do have 2 other queer things on the slate, this is a really good project. And I understand, we're servicing demographics, but there's a lot of straight stuff. Nobody is starving for straight content. So if 4 projects end up being queer, what's the big deal? You know what I mean? In the grand scheme of things.
I'm working on the gay tennis show right now.
The gay tennis. Let's talk about decision makers, because I think oftentimes we have conversations in which we skate around it a little bit, and we talk about representation and you know, not limiting it to 1 of 10 or 3 of 10. So I asked the question about, in terms of who here has worked in film and television, just to get a sense of who here really has maybe been part of, you know, applying for something and not getting it, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe one of you, I will look to Damon.
You're giving me the hard questions here.
Who are the decision makers, right? In film, television, other screen content in Canada, who are the core decision makers here?
Well, I would say we have, there's sort of a hierarchy. I think if you're going to go to our federal funders, it's Telefilm Canada who makes decisions. They're a juried system, so they bring in juries to evaluate every round of decisions, along with folks who actually work there. So it's sort of like a co-decision process, as I understand it. Now, it changes every couple of years, so I'm not sure if that's the situation this year. But a lot of what's driving those decisions are distribution. You know, who's the distributor that you're showing up with when you put an application in? And I do think having certain distribution options on the table, which also includes Canadian broadcasters, can help drive a project's success. I've certainly seen that with my own stuff. And then there's provincial agencies who put money into projects, technically usually after Telefilm and the Canadian Media Fund, which is the sort of television fund in Canada, have made their decisions. So that's kind of the lay of the land. And then there's smaller funds like the Bell Fund and the Cogeco Fund that can come in and help top up your funding. But it's a rich and vast ecosystem of funding. Like you go to the UK, the British Film Institute funds, I think, like maybe 30 films a year. In Canada, Telefilm puts money into 75 films a year, you know, at different budget levels. But that's pretty incredible for a country of, what, 40 million people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle, I'm going to ask you, in the present or near future, or a parallel universe in Canada, what are some alternate or additional funding opportunities that you would
like to see in my dream world? Okay, so here's the thing. We have incredible creators, incredible content, incredible ideas, incredible shows, incredible everything. What we don't have is the infrastructure to support small production companies. There's lots of big production companies, and essentially what's happened in the last 5 years, if you're paying attention, you'll have seen bigger companies gobbling up medium-sized companies and creating these giant conglomerates. And then there's people like myself and yourself who run little production companies on our own. And you know, oftentimes we're the ones who are willing to take the risk or do the crazy thing, or we're in this because we're crazy and not trying to make money. Crazy passionate, but also crazy. And I would love to see some support for, like, some corporate support. And by that I mean, Bell has a really good slate fund. And what that is a slate is all of the things on your list of projects that you are currently working on, from, ooh, I had an idea, to this one's about to be delivered, the whole gamut. I have about 12 things on my slate now. Now, I have to service all of those things in development with my own money, right? Because who else is going to do it? And that's where I think people get stymied, and that's where these really unfortunate statistics of, like, I think I heard recently at an industry function, like 30 to 40% of independent producers have left the game since COVID. That's 30 to 40% of people like us who were out here trying to make content, trying to do what we do, trying to find the next generation of voices, and they just were like, you know what, I can't hack it. I'm out. There's no meat on this bone. And because, you know, we're not all trust fund kids. We don't all have deep pockets and wells of money, but there's also not a culture in this country of supporting film and television like there is in the US. You know, in the US, there's millionaires with slush funds who say, you know what, I want an executive producer credit and I want to go on a red carpet. Here's some money. Here's some money. And, you know, you could say to them, you know, you might end up at Tribeca. You might end up making your money back. I can't look somebody in the face in Canada and say, you're going to make your money back. You know?
Yeah,
it's a different world here.
I think there's different incentives for equity investment in productions in the States than there are in Canada.
Correct.
So it's also maybe about looking at our tax laws that can sort of bring some of those.
But specifically for small production companies who are just trying to claw their way through the next quarter or the next year, like some kind of, or more slate funds that sort of support the business, and then let the people who have proven success, who've shown you that they can make great stuff and that they have great taste, let those people develop new content without having to go into insane amounts of debt and remortgage their houses.
So I'm going to ask Peter. This 30 to 40% stat is alarming. Could be for any sector. If you heard that a group was departing an industry because of all the reasons we've just heard, what happens next? How does that change the next 10, 15 years in terms of what we can do as an industry?
I don't know if I have a good answer. Sorry, in terms of the fact that 30% to 40% of these companies are no longer.
Yeah, and let's say of that, I mean, we don't have the stats in front of us, but of that, let's say 40 to 50%, right, are from the LGBTQ plus community.
Definitely.
Let's just say. So, what's the knock-on effect of those kinds of departures from the industry?
Well, because so in terms of like whether it's in Canada or in the UK or the US, the queer content that I am sort of hold dearest in my heart, it is coming from independent filmmakers. Sometimes they're being picked up by an A24 or an Elevation, but that's where the greatest queer content's always going to come from. I mean, there's going to be exceptions to the rule every once in a while where, Heated Rivalry, I guess to some degree, but that also is kind of an independent thing. So if we lose those people making those movies, what are we left with?
Exactly.
And we certainly can't think that the Hollywood studios are ever going to make the movies we want them to make. And as you say, like more gobbling up. We need these smaller production companies and outfits and then otherwise we're not going to get any of the content that we want to see in film or in television, because that's where it comes from, and that's where people like the two of you are taking the risks that give us the next Jacob Tierney.
Exactly.
Because Jacob Tierney was an independent filmmaker making a queer adaptation of Charles Dickens twist, and that's where he got his start.
Which is really good, by the way.
It's very good, and someone took a chance on him to do that, and without that, we probably wouldn't have Heated Rivalry. So we need people like that, or else in 10, 15 years from now, we're going to be left with Netflix garbage. And it's not like there isn't something to be said about Heartstopper, a show I've never actually seen, but
shocked to hear that.
I don't like crying.
Yeah, okay, sure.
There.
It's good for you, Peter.
I know.
You should try it.
it.
We do a lot of that.
Not all Netflix is slop, and sometimes that slop has a purpose. But we also really, really need the people who are taking the risk on the people who are doing wild things with their work, like Jane Schoenbrunn. I just saw Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, which won the Queer Palm at Cannes. They are just incredible, the work that they're doing, and the only reason they are where they are right now is because people invested in them.
Took a risk.
Yeah,
I saw the TV Glow happened. I saw the TV Glow was insanely brilliant, and then everyone said, "Oh, what do you want to do next?" And then we get Gillian Anderson and Hannah Einbender in this incredible film that's coming out
August 8th for movie. I know that.
I tell you that I moved my frame line?
All opinions expressed
Flight,
are
so I can go to
individual,
that screening.
not the panel as an entire entity.
But basically, to answer your question is basically, if this continues to happen, we will lose those voices, and those voices are key. Not just for the films they're making when they start off, but so that they can eventually get to the point where they are making Heated Rivalry.
Because guys, we're not geniuses, right? But people come to us. And I have, since I started Gay Agenda coming on 3 years ago, I have had so many incredible queer people come to me with incredible ideas from across the country, Vancouver to Halifax, and I'm not exaggerating. And I can't service them all. Some of them are great ideas, but at a certain point I have to sort of like turn people away and say no. And I would love to have a bustling, thriving business where I could go, we're going to put you into development, kid, and we're going to see how you do and write your pilot. And, I can't do any of that stuff. I don't even have an office. You know what I mean? It's really hard. And I think that's the issue, is that we independent producers who are not part of the giant corporations and that we shall not be named, they're great, some of them, but they have different priorities. Their priorities are making money above all things. They have shareholders that they have to answer to. They've got to make next year this much more money than last year. We sometimes take a flyer on something. We sometimes lose money on things.
Oh yeah.
Right? Often, always. But we're still in it for the passion and the love, and we hope that we throw a bunch of projects at the wall and one becomes a heated rivalry. But if it doesn't, that's okay too. We're in it for that reason, and I think, to Peter's point, that's why it's important.
Success story, The Queen of My Dreams, which I was an executive producer on, that was a real heavy lift to sort of pull that off. That was like
Incredible
a queer,
film, by the way.
coming of age, Pakistani, young woman, first time feature, Fawzia Mirza. If you haven't seen it, I think it's on CBC Gem right now. Check it out. But we had a gap in financing, and we really needed to go to Pakistan to really tell that story. And had to do it undercover, by the way, because you couldn't be like shown making a queer film in Pakistan. But we couldn't find the equity investment that we needed in Canada, so we went abroad. We went to the U.S. and we were able to raise money out of the U.S. And I do think we have to start looking outside of our boundaries here in Canada. I'm leaning more and more into co-productions, even though there are beasts to put together, international co-pros. But that's kind of the direction that I think we have to.
But then to your point, I mean, Canada and the U.S. don't have a co-production treaty, so that was probably a weird thing for you to even have to put
we
together.
can get some equity from the U.S. into our financing. There's ways to do that, but we should be doing it with Canadians. We should be there should be structures in place that encourage that kind of investment from Canadians.
I actually can't think of in recent memory a Canadian co-pro. I mean, aside from what you just mentioned, which isn't quite it, but with any of the 100,000 treaties that we have, okay, we don't have 100,000, but I can't think of one in the past 5 to 10 years, specifically stories from this community. I could be wrong, but that definitely.
I'm going to kick myself in the ass.
I know. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I bet there's been docs.
There has been docs.
Yeah, there's probably been documentaries. Narrative features?
Yeah.
Let me think about that.
Yeah, I'm
sure. So we've been talking a lot about, frankly, film and series, but I want to put this out here to you. What are the other opportunities? I'm going to be very honest. People keep saying microdramas to me, and eventually, one of these days, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch something. But what are the opportunities that we have right now? Maybe some in the past that you kind of look back and wish, I wish I'd sort of jumped into that, what I thought was a trend. And what are our predictions? Who wants to start?
I can start. I would love, everyone knows YouTube is an opportunity. And I think we as traditional media makers really need to get with the program. When I heard this weekend that YouTube has surpassed Netflix for the amount of hours viewed in a day across the board, I was like, wow. Okay.
They're the biggest Netflix competitor.
That's your biggest broadcaster in the world. So you have to get period. And they're agnostic in terms of length. So you can kind of do whatever you want. So what I'm trying to do right now actively is find my algorithm jockey little queer genius who's going to come and build my Gay Agenda YouTube channel. But to your point, verticals are really interesting. Cheap and cheerful. You can shoot them really easily. If you don't know what they are, it's anything that's shot with a phone aspect ratio. So it's called vertical. And they can be any length. They can be 2 minutes. They can be 15 minutes. It's perfect bite-sized stuff to watch while you're in transit or doing something else. That sort of how we do 3 things at once and we have 2 screens open. It's that kind of stuff. But they're outrageously successful because they're cheap and cheerful and easy to make, and so they can really make tons of them and see what sticks. So I agree with you that it's maybe not there yet, like you're not compelled yet, but I have a feeling there'll be a big breakout vertical hit that everybody will watch, and then we'll all start to sort of migrate there.
Yeah, YouTube is really interesting because look at last weekend, Backrooms, right? How many of you have seen Backrooms? Yeah.
Oh, I'm dying to see it.
Yeah, that is migrated from YouTube directly to Hollywood studios. So beware, they're on them. They're on YouTube right now. They're after those creators. We got to hold on to the queer,
Absolutely.
sort of geniuses that are there right now before they get snapped up by studios. Because like last year, you sort of take a look at some of those studio sequels that completely bombed compared to Sinners, which was like a completely fresh, original film that was made without any underlying IP, which is so rare. And I feel like Hollywood has kind of burned itself out, so it's now looking to 20-year-olds to sort of have fresh ideas to bring in.
But those 20-year-olds are not like I was when I was 20. They're not going to compromise things.
No.
What I
it's a
really
different
like about
generation.
this generation. They're like, if you're not going to do what I want, I'll just put it on YouTube, bro, and charge $5. So what are we going to do here? And I love that pushback, I think that the studios know their days are numbered, and they've really got to get with the program. Because the 20-year-olds today are not like we were. They're not putting up with it.
And I'm going to ask you, Peter, is there a specific opportunity for a platform like, I hate to use the word platform, but like YouTube or these verticals, micro dramas? Is there a specific opportunity to tap into for this community?
I mean, I'm going to expose myself as like a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to media consumption and bounce off this a little bit differently than your question, which is to say that, yes, Backrooms came from YouTube, but people are going to see it in the movie theater. And I'm very sort of hardcore at being like, please go to the movie theater, watch movies in a movie theater. And I think people are now. And they're just craving original content, whether it be Backrooms or Obsession, or even to some degree Project Hail Mary from a couple months ago. And then these Star Wars Grogu things are tanking because people are finally over this. And I do think that, not to bring it back to something that is old, but I do think that there's a renewal of interest in going to the movies, and maybe we're finding talent from interesting sort of ways, whether they came up on YouTube or not. And I just think that that's really interesting. Like, I run a queer film night at the Paradise once a month. And we, 2 weeks ago, we showed a 1971 German film called It Is Not the Homosexual Who Is Perverse But the Society in Which He Lives. Sorry, I've had to say that title so many times in the past 2 weeks, and I finally have it down. But it sold out. And it was mostly young people who just really wanted to see it. And I'm an elder millennial, and I'm trying to sort of witness what Gen Z and Gen Alpha are interested in, just as even a programmer of movie nights. And I think there's a real sincere interest in going to. I think
sincere is the right word.
In going to see things in traditional methods, and also the aspect of community building that can come with seeing a movie in a movie theater for a generation that lost many years to COVID. I think that is something that we should just not be
live about.
Yeah, I think it should be something that we think about.
I think it's two things. I think we've lost a lot of third spaces. We've lost a lot of places where queer folks hung out. Like when I used to go to like Boots or whatever, now I'm aging myself, or whatever.
I was there.
You were there. And, there's the old queen at the bar, and he's going to tell you some stories about back in the day. And then there's the old Les who's at the door, and she's going to tell you some stories about back in the day. And intergenerational relationships, that's how queer people have always passed along the tips, the tricks, how do we navigate this world as queer people. We've learned that through intergenerational relationships. We don't do that anymore. People are still going to bars and parties and stuff, but not in that way where you had a bar that used to, like the neighbor. Anyway, that's one thing. We've lost the third spaces. Also, young people are socializing differently. To your point, COVID, they're not out raging the way they used to. And alcohol sales have gone down. And so people want to hang out in a different way. So it's amazing that your screenings are, I'm so excited about it. And I love that people are going back to the theater. Thank God. It means we can save theaters like the Paradise and the Royal and the Hot Docs Theater from disappearing. That would be the worst thing ever. So I think that's an amazing hot tip. That the kids are coming back.
And it's not an isolated incident. It's not just me. It's happening in tons of programs around the city, and not just queer programs for all different kinds of communities. And it's definitely happening in other cities.
The Review has a huge following.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think, look, I'm trying to I think I'm going to sort of dedicate the rest of my life trying to make sure that people keep going to the movies. So you're never going to get me saying I hope that people watch a YouTube clip, and I'm probably never going to watch it either. So.
Wow. Okay, we went polarizing.
Went dark. It went dark.
YouTube, very polarizing. I'm sorry I brought it up.
No, please.
No, I love this talk about third spaces, and I think you've just touched on something. I think many communities probably could speak to the shift in in-person right? How you socialize, the generational shifts.
Even offices. I mean, most people I know do not go to an office every morning. They either work from home or maybe it's 2 days a week. Like, that was also social time, right?
Yeah.
You meet people or you go for a drink after work. I mean, so third space, even offices are missing.
So I guess I want to bring, I mean, again, this third space is very interesting to me. And Peter, I think what you had shared with us about, these nights being more popular than ever in many ways, like, I guess I want to bring it back to, like, we talked about decision makers, but beyond the decision makers, and so even like looking back at films from previous generations, what's the responsibility of audiences in your case, and what are responsibilities, beyond the decision makers, beyond the people that are juries deciding who gets what? What can an audience member do, a fan, and an average person do in this moment, going back to if we're in a really momentous time with something like, and I'll say it, hidden rivalry, everybody, right? Really sort of like throwing the door open wide. What's our responsibility collectively or as individual groups to keep that door open or open another door?
I mean, look, we obviously came out in droves, and I say we, heated rivalry, largely it was a straight women who made that such a huge success story, and that's great. But I just think of from my specific perspective, we're coming up on a few months of really incredible movies coming out. John Early's Maddie's Secret is an incredible movie. Leviticus, an Australian queer horror movie. I think it's just if we can go and make Obsession and Backrooms, and we as queer people are contributing to these phenomenons, we do also need to, if we can, go out to the movies and buy a ticket to queer content as well, because I think that's really sort of important in allowing this to keep building off of whatever surge we're having.
Yeah, and the hot seller at Cannes this year was actually Club Kid.
Jordan Firstman's film.
Yeah, Jordan Firstman's feature, made with private equity out of New York.
There you go. Jordan Firstman had a rich gay who threw him some money and he made a film, and he was able to turn it around in 6 months, and that's the other problem. I just made a feature, sorry to interrupt.
Go for it.
I just made a feature doc about Carol Pope, who some of you may know. It took 6 years. To keep up the momentum, to keep up the interest, to keep Carol Pope, who's turning 80 this August, like engaged and excited. I mean, it really is a challenge, but if you can have an idea and turn it around that fast, I mean, it keeps the generative process fresh.
It'll make you cream your jeans.
It'll make you cream. He said it, I did it. We are at the Canadian Club, Damon.
I'm glad you brought up that film, because I do want to say the film, Michelle recently won Best Canadian Feature.
Thanks.
Whoa!
So, at Inside Out. And so, 6 years is a long time.
It's a long time. And I mean, obviously, I did other things during that time, but it's just an example to the group here that it's not, imagine spending 6 years of your life on something. It's really, and then you've got other things going on, but I think that these gaps, and a lot of it is because you're waiting for a fund, you get the fund. Now you apply to another fund, and it's sort of a domino thing, so you have to wait. It's just the way the system is designed. But it would be so much better to have Jordan Firstman's friend's number and just be able to get a check.
Hey.
And listen, I keep saying it, Megan Ellison, call me. She's one of the Ellisons, but she's a lesbian, and she has a $100 million fund for Annapurna Pictures every year. And she just has to turn a profit.
What was her last lesbian film that she made?
Exactly. But where are our Megan Ellisons? Where are the Canadians who would do that? But then again, can we promise them a profit?
Well, that goes back to distribution. We're in a circle here. Yeah, you know.
I'm going to look to Colleen, who is creeping closer to us, because I'm not wearing a watch, and I
Is
have
it
no
Q&A
idea what time
time?
it is. So tell us, Colleen, what do we need?
Right over here. Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
Well, sorry. You can.
Okay, I'll be really quick. I want to build on that question around the audience. Where do you see the next built-in audience? Because for HR,
Oh, wow. Okay, That's heated rivalry, everybody. HR. Okay, sorry, I have to repeat the question, don't I? Yes.
The built-in audience was this romance novel, like people reading romance books. So where do you see the next kind of built-in audience for your content? Because that's what made that show huge. And I didn't even know, I wasn't even into romance before this. But anyway, not giving myself away. Okay, but anyways, is there a built-in?
I'm not going to get into my formula about why straight women love heated rivalry. If you
That's
want to know
another
about it,
panel.
I'll
That's
tell you
another
after.
panel.
I'll tell you after.
I
But-
want to hear about it now.
Video games, horror, there's these communities are.
Peter's probably the
Built-in
one to answer. Peter knows the trends. He knows what's
Okay,
going
let's start
on.
with Peter. So built-in audience, the next
What's
thing.
the next trend, Peter?
Coming at us.
Queer horror is a really interesting
Queer
thing to explore. We'll see, like Leviticus, this Australian movie. I think it comes out next week. It's very much sort of like a queer It Follows. Let's see if we can do that. Let's make queer horror happen and make it profitable.
I have been pitched, I'm not joking, no less than a dozen queer horrors in 3 years. They're so hot. There's something about, well, queer people are outsiders by nature, obviously, right? And so there's, and have had to deal with a lot of adversity. And I don't know, there's something about the genre, right? There's something about the thing around the corner that you can't see that I guess queer people can relate to.
And very much what Sex and Death and Camp Miasma, if I forget if I'm saying it right, Teenage Sex, anyway.
Yeah.
James Schoenbrun's new film very much delves into sort of the history of just queer subtext in horror, which is very present. If you think of,
Always.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2 or Sleepaway Camp or all these movies that, often actually like the queer people are making these movies and putting things in there for us. It seems like now is an opportunity for people to actually make queer horror texts and for us to play with all the things you
Being
just
queer
mentioned.
used to be a horror. Now let's make films about it. You know what I mean?
That's the quote of the night. Damon, your thoughts? Built-in audiences.
I've got 2 queer horror films on my slate.
There you go.
I'm developing right now.
You really?
Trendsetter.
Oh my God. Okay, that's another panel. Thank you for your question.
Great
I
question.
saw another question over here. Hello.
I have a question. It's just a bit about like the intersection of like intention, impact, and I guess like creative direction. So if we're talking like heated rivalry, like I know that things like the Canadian impact and things like polling and politics were impacted by like Mark Carney being like, do the like thing. We see like the creative industry, especially in the zeitgeist of where we're existing right now, having sway into our political nature. Like what drives you to the audience? I guess to your question as well, like the audience and knowing that it's so impactful, and what drives you to kind of put the intention behind the product that you're like producing for us, essentially.
I think that is a brilliant question and a very complicated one. And I'm going to look to each of them No, don't be sorry. I think it's a great question. I think I'm going to look to each of these who will have very
So
specific
just to
answers.
summarize, what you're asking is, why do we do the work that we do? What drives us?
Yeah, not just what drives you, but like knowing that it's impactful. Like
Knowing it's impactful.
The intersection
That's
of impact.
the answer. The answer's in the question.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, for me, I listen. I'll be really frank with all of you. I had a very fruitful career as gun for hire. I worked on Canada's Drag Race, and I've worked on car shows for Discovery, and I worked on all kinds of stuff. And I've been doing it for 20 plus years and had a good career, and then had a midlife crisis and decided to start a production company. But it truly, because of that reason, because I was seeing dreams die, I was seeing projects wither. I was seeing cis straight people tell queer people how to make content. And it just got to a point where it was untenable for me as a creative person. I couldn't handle it anymore. And I just decided to take a huge risk and decided to eliminate that layer between me and the networks and be the production company, and then also be the home for young people to come and pitch to me, and so that I could help them get their projects out into the world. So for me, the answer is the impact, because all the queer content I've done, I've seen the impact it's had on people. They've come and told me, and they didn't come and tell me that about Lost Car Rescue.
Well, maybe
what I mean?
not as many.
Although, listen, I do love cars. I would do another car show in a minute.
It'd be a gay car show.
Gay car.
There you go.
Why haven't we done that? The question now is why? Why not? Okay, Damon.
Okay. I'm contemplating if I should get political or not.
Do it.
because-
I
do it,
know.
do it, do it.
Let me just say this. And
okay.
this will be a question for one of you later.
So it's really interesting that you picked up on the fact that the Prime Minister was posing with one of the stars of Heated Rivalry at the CMPA's annual gathering called Prime Time in Ottawa, which I think had about 1 billion social impressions and led to a surge in popularity. And I don't know if you've been following the news this week. CRTC decision was made where suddenly the film and television industry became a trade irritant. And, you know, this
$600 million.
Yeah, it was sort of like, oh, there's your consolation prize. We just don't want you to be an irritant while we're dealing with auto manufacturers, you know? And I do think that that's something that we have to fight for. We have to be loud, you know, and you know, as I've sort of aged up in the industry, advocacy is a really important part of what I do because this is an industry that keeps us employed coast to coast to coast. It is a trans-Canada, and I use the word trans proudly, you know, industry that we're working in. And I do think that, you know, what we've built here is really something worth keeping. So the Online Streaming Act, which was 10 years in the making, was an incredible achievement, which we had agreement on from all of the American studios at the time that it was sent to the CRTC. And now the narrative is changing because we have, you know, this person in power south of the border who's imposing tariffs on us. But it's really complex. But I do feel like there is a sense of betrayal that's really, really, you know, very, very evident right now in our industry.
You don't get to hug Hudson and then take away our money.
Exactly, exactly. Quid pro quo. Yeah.
So that actually was the question I was going to also pose to you. We talk about an image can say many different things. That image says something different now. But Peter, what can that image say down the road for us? And we all know the image, the Prime Minister leg up on
Hudson.
On Hudson.
What does it say down the road? I don't know how it's going to age. I mean, I feel like both of you are sort of better positioned to speak to this element of it.
Well, I think we can use it as an example. I mean, it's the timing is hilarious.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
Is that it?
You couldn't have cashed
all that we
in.
can do with that?
Well, no. I mean, listen, we can push back. We have to. I mean, we have to, or we don't survive. And then you guys all just watch American shows, and that's the end of that.
It is really hard though because the bar.
Watch your gay American hockey shows.
Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yes.
The bar is really low for our world leaders right now, and you know I have a lot of very liberal family members who love Mark Carney.
I love a lot about Mark.
And so yeah, I mean, I just feel like we live in a really strange existence right now, where unfortunately, you know, if you compare leadership to other countries, the bar is not just low; it's like in the ground.
No,
so,
and for that,
it's
Mark
hard not
Carney
to just knock on wood, be like, thank God we live here.
But
we have to also be critical too.
Specific to this topic, specific to saying, actually, streamers, you don't have to pay for anything. Just come in here and
just use us. We'll
use
bend
us,
over.
abuse us, no problem. You don't have to give us anything. Canadian content doesn't matter. That's a betrayal, and that's to your point.
It is.
But yeah, to your point, of course, it's Mark Carney contains multitudes, and there's a lot to love.
And my point is more, just to be a little more specific, it's more that I do feel like a lot of people aren't paying attention to exactly what just happened. Like a lot of people don't know that happened, and a lot of people are really at this point, whether they're working in the industry or not, willing to look the other way and not be critical of not just Mark Carney, but anything happening in Canada, because what's happening around the world is so much worse. But I think that even though that's happening, we still need to be thoughtful and critical of leadership across any sort of element in this country. Just because we have it better here than a lot of other places in the world doesn't mean that we shouldn't be fighting for exactly what you two were talking about.
Exactly. It just feels like Heated Rivalry was like the Super Bowl, and now you're saying, wait, we managed to get all the way to the Super Bowl and win the game, and now you're going to be like, you know what? Let's cancel the team. What? What?
And
that will be our
previously,
last reference to, are you going to say one more thing about Heated Rivalry? No, I welcome it.
No, I was going to say they negotiated away the digital sales tax, and they got nothing back from that. That was like a year ago. Surely they would have learned a lesson, That's all.
I think our industry is an easy one to kick around.
Yep.
That's just the bottom line.
I'm going to take a question from this side of the room. Again, I have no sense of time right now, Colleen.
So you talked passionately about our unique ability to ideate, identify, create amazing content. And tie those two things together?
Do you want me to?
Go.
Yeah.
Go.
Well, we have a series of co-production treaties, which are created specifically. I mean, they've done a lot of this work, for Canada to, work with Ireland or the UK or Australia or whatever. We do not have a co-production agreement with the United States, which is, unfortunate. But what I want to say to turn it around is that if you really look at the world, you look at, like the UK, they put out some of the most incredible content. Ireland, like Dairy Girls, like there's so much incredible queer work being done elsewhere, and thirsty for it. There, there's broadcasters like Stan and like, ITV, people who want intelligent, creative partners who want to work with intelligent, creative partners to make this content. So I would like to sidestep the US altogether and just work with Europeans, work with the Australians, work with whoever is on the same page and wants to make the same kind of great content. And it enriches all of us. We get to access their actors, they get to access our tax credits. It's a win-win. But to Damon's point, it is a colossal administrative task. And and it's not easy to do in different currencies and different partners. And you don't, unlike in this industry where you can like call someone and Jack and check out what's Damon like. You meet people at a market. You don't really know who you're getting into business with. It's a risk. So there's all of those things. Of course, we want to diversify and work with everybody. Yeah.
Damon, thoughts?
I think international co-production treaties are sort of a thing unto themselves. We have 60 of them, I believe, right now. It's interesting because Mark Carney positions us as middle powers and is really encouraging similar kinds of activity that we've been doing in the film industry for 20 years, co-productions, in other industries where it's kind of like, okay, let's look beyond south of the border to find trade alliances. And it's interesting that sometimes Canadian film co-production treaties gets referenced, in light of what we're trying to do in other parts of our economy right now. Yeah. I think we should work on our tax laws, though, that kind of open up the door to more involvement, of investment into content.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Well, if you look at the UK, they have a history of EIS schemes, equity investment schemes.
Right. Like the lotteries.
And just like different mechanisms that exist for private sector to become involved. Because I've been at this for a while, and I've met people who are interested, but when they sort of look at the tax rules, there's no benefit to it, So you really kind of have to sweeten it. Like back in the days of 1989 when dentists used to be producers,
Oy, oy, oy.
Yeah.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
But it's like you look at All of Us Strangers, right? And then right before in the credits, it's like the National Lottery, and you're like, whoa, the National Lottery financed this amazing film, Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if we had something like that?
Yeah, it would be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just reading across the room. Peter, do you want to jump in quickly on that?
I mean, I will say, I'm just learning a lot from both of you. I'm really not on the same sort of side of the industry as the two of you are, and I've learned a lot sitting up here next to both of you. So I don't know if I have anything to contribute to that specific conversation that you were just having, but it's very good to know, and I hope that, why don't the two of you just run the Canadian film industry?
Well, maybe we will.
It would be really great.
Thank you very much.
So I'm sure all of our panelists will be happy to answer questions afterwards.
We'll stick around.
But thank you for
Thanks, guys. This was great. And really great questions, all of you.
Yeah.
Really,
you guys were listening.
Smart room. Thanks.
What a fabulous discussion. Michelle, Damon, Peter, thank you for that look. That was inside baseball.
Yep.
That was amazing.
Yeah,
thank
it was
you.
very
Learned
granular.
So
I'm sorry
much.
if it was too granular,
It was amazing.
This crowd can handle it. They're smart.
And Judy, thank you so much for moderating so deftly and thoughtfully. Really wonderful. I'd once again like to thank our presenting sponsor, TD Bank Group, for making tonight's event possible. A special thank you to VVC Live for supporting tonight's production and live stream. Before we leave, we've got a couple of new events coming up. They're our last two of the season. They're both focused on Canada-US things that are happening. Please go to canadianclub.org to find out more information, become a member, look at our content. On behalf of Canadian Club Toronto, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Happy Pride. Enjoy the reception. There's more drinks downstairs. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.